Credit is a special financial instrument, a very subtle one, it should be noted, which not every person knows how to use. It plays a very important role in our lives. It contributes to the development of the economy, and also satisfies the desires and needs of millions of people. However, in society, the attitude to credits is ambiguous. On the one hand, everyone is happy with the opportunities that credits provide to each of us, but on the other hand, because of problems with debts, people criticize this financial instrument. Some even call it sheer evil, ruining people's lives. In this article, I decided to analyze the topic of credit as widely as possible, touching not so much on the technical aspects of this financial instrument, which you can learn about on the internet without me, as on its ideological foundations and their importance for us. After reading this article, you will learn a lot of new things about credit, which will allow you to finally decide what it is, credit, and what to eat it with. Let's start by paying attention to the attitude of different people to loans, to their opinion about it, which, as I have already said, is not unambiguous. Today, it is not uncommon to hear negative reviews about loans as a tool for enslaving people, like the court interest is evil, and in general, all these debts and interest are all a big deception of humanity. To be honest, until I myself did not know enough about this world and the peculiarities of managing people in it, I also somehow fell for all these tales about the harm of loans and the slave debt chains. But after my picture of the world was supplemented with important fundamental knowledge about its structure and I understood how humanity came to what we call a civilized world, I realized that although loans are evil, they are far from the worst evil in this world. There is evil worse than any loans, and we know this evil. And to understand what we are talking about, it is necessary to simply realize one simple fact: you and I have lived, live and will probably live in a slave society. Yes, the form of slavery is not as obvious today as it used to be, which is what actually makes people believe that they are not slaves, but free citizens of this or that country, with more or less equal rights and opportunities. In reality, this is not so, and we, well, most of us, are greatly limited in everything, in freedom, and in rights, and in opportunities. But no matter what we say, our current situation, at least if we talk about people living in developed and developing countries of the world, is much better than the situation of our ancestors, who were actually slaves and who had practically no chance to change their lives. In many ways, they did not have these chances because they did not have access to the information about the world order that is important for every person, which makes us educated people and helps us understand ourselves, so they accepted their slave position as the norm. You and I, living in the modern world, in which the damned credit makes us slaves, have, if not a complete understanding of what kind of world we live in, and who we are in general, people, then in any case, opportunities to get this useful information for us about the world and about ourselves, we definitely have. A modern person has plenty of opportunities to make his life relatively free and secure, and thanks to, not just anything, but namely the credit and financial system, people use these opportunities. Well, maybe the same business, not the most profitable, especially for some underdeveloped countries, considered developing, but in fact degrading, occupation. Nevertheless, it is better to do business than to be a workhorse and plow someone else's garden. Here you have a loan, here you have slavery, but if you want, any person can get a more or less normal education, and start a business, and even change their place of residence, if they want. And in general, no one prevents us from reading any books that interest us and with their help learning how to live correctly, competently, and to our advantage in this difficult world. Yes, mass culture completely corrupts the brains of most people and draws them more, not to books, but to television, on which, well, you know, talk shows for idiots are mainly shown. But this does not mean that access to useful information is completely closed to us. It's all about our desire to receive it. Well, perhaps my articles will contribute to awakening this desire in each of you. After all, the smarter our society is, the better, more interesting and higher quality our life in it will be. I think so. But as for global interests, you and I understand that in order for us to have something, that is, we personally, each of us separately, or we people, society, must work. And to make a person work, you can either force him through fear, we call it motivation by a whip, or by bribing a person, when some kind of reward serves as motivation, in the form of an ephemeral carrot. Therefore, credit slavery is, in general, the incentive with which we have to force underdeveloped people to work, influencing, mainly, their instinctive greed, while other people, more intelligent, have the opportunity to do those things that they do not only out of necessity, but also because of meaning. It is clear, yes, that a person needs to somehow feed himself, and for this it is necessary to work, and it is necessary to have some goals/purpose in life in order to strive for them, for it, and thereby live a life with meaning. Credits do not determine the meaning of life for a smart person, but a stupid person can live only for the sake of consuming. It is precisely the latter, that is, the fools, who are actively being cultivated in our time, in all these incubator megalopolises. While they are being cultivated, and then who knows what rules we will live by in the future. We can easily move from the ideology of consumption to the ideology of dictatorship, repression, intimidation, and even to the destruction of people, to the destruction of supposedly wrong people, enemies of our society. Such a life will return us to the Middle Ages, and no matter how unpromising it may seem, we can very well come to it. Our civilized and supposedly developed world is very fragile, friends, it is very easy to destroy. Just understand that if it weren't for loans, how else could we motivate people to work, how could we make them create? Maybe only with a stick, nothing else can be offered here. It is clear that the need to satisfy one's natural needs forces a person to work, but this is not enough for the full development of humanity. Today, we enjoy many of the benefits of civilization that were created because someone had the desire and opportunity to make our lives better. And if we only did what we could to satisfy our natural needs, we would still be riding horses, not driving cars. The credit and financial system is a kind of slave system, a relatively good form, compared to other forms, in which people live much worse. Imagine that all these loans cease to exist, what do you think would happen to our lives then? Will it get better or worse? Well, it is quite obvious that one form of slavery will be replaced by another form of slavery, to put it crudely. And I suspect that the new form of slavery will be significantly worse than the current, credit financial form of slavery, because the examples that we have today, with the same China, India, where people, for the most part, work almost only for food, they are, let's say, not impressive. There are loans there too, that's clear, but the life that ordinary workers live there, in my opinion, is simply terrible. There are other examples, which I don't really know anything about, but which indicate that there are living conditions in which people do not live at all, but survive. They fight for survival every day, fight for every piece of bread and drop of water. I read in one book that in Nigeria 5,000 people apply for one job. This is terrible, friends, you must agree, terrible. With such a life it will not be a new car or a new phone that will stimulate a person to work, for which in developed and some developing countries people take out a loan, but fear and hunger. I won't even mention the gulags, they are the apotheosis of cruelty and savagery. After all, when your own state oppresses you and forces you to work yourself to exhaustion, it defies any rational explanation. We lived like that. This is our history, it is quite cruel and bloody, so we have a lot to choose from. Everything that was in our, sometimes rather dark past, can become an alternative to the current, although also slavish, but still quite acceptable credit and financial system. You understand the most important thing, friends, those people who rule this world and individual countries need to stimulate the people, the crowd, the human masses, to work, including frankly slave labor. Only for this, for work, do they need all these multi-million herds of insatiable and eternally dissatisfied creatures, which they breed like rabbits. Most of us came into the world only because we, human beings, have nothing and no one to replace us yet. We are needed for work, both for hard physical work and for intellectual work. As soon as they create more practical and significantly less demanding robots that will cost less than a person, they will no longer need you and me. In any case, they will definitely not need a large number of people. Many people will simply become unprofitable. There will be no need to breed people in such numbers, and some of us will need to be completely eliminated like garbage. I am sure there will be no problems with this, because we, brainless idiots, are very easy to set against each other, and we will kill each other with pleasure. We will kill each other either because of resources, or because of our gods, or because of the color of our skin, or because of something else that irritates us. And everything irritates us. We will find a reason to hate each other. We are aggressive creatures. So, this is our present time, when we do something for money, and not out of fear, when we are allowed to take loans and buy everything we want with them. This is a great time, because never before have slaves lived as well as they do today. If you do not want to consider yourself slaves, that is your right, but I do not advise you to stick your nose up too high. After all, it is enough to look at how people are twisted and turned, used as cannon fodder and bent below the baseboard, to understand that the majority of people, in their personal qualities and herd behavior, are really meat. If the powers that be want, they will wipe all of us off the face of the earth in an instant, including the coolest ones, who bend their fingers in their big machines. But for now, here we are, taking out all these credit cards, doing idiocy shopping, creating businesses, buying chicken coops for ourselves and breeding in them, relaxing, having fun, degenerating, in general, living more or less normally. True, we can live better, but for this we must stop being dumb meat and become people. And for this, a completely different ideology is needed, a completely different mentality, a completely different system of values. Maybe someone like Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, Krishna will bring something new, something more humane into our lives someday. But there are no such people yet. So, my friends, be glad that you have the opportunity, if not to be, then at least to seem like normal people, and not slaves, who not only have bread on the table and a roof over their heads, but also have the opportunity to have a car, modern technology, beautiful clothes, fancy things, the opportunity to study and create a business, thanks to loans. You might not have had all this, if not for rotten capitalism with its system of values, under which, oddly enough, people live much better than under wonderful and beautiful socialism, which, as history shows, is not even capable of feeding people, let alone more. In addition, given our animal nature, given our savagery and hatred for our own kind, I mean the hatred of people for each other, we could exploit each other much more harshly, as it was before, for example. Motivation in the form of high wages or motivation in the form of fear for your life, fear of hunger, is there a difference between them? What would you personally really like, to interest another person with a lot of money so that he would do something for you, or to intimidate him, and get yours without incurring any costs? Think carefully about your true desire, and then you will understand what role loans play in our lives. Do you think that a loan is just money given out at interest, which must be gradually repaid? No, it is much more. It is a whole ideology, a whole concept of life, implying a certain way of life and a certain system of values. Living by this concept, not that it is so good, it has enough shortcomings. We see how some people pray for new sneakers or love their brand new car more than their own children. It is simply better for our unreasonable and extremely aggressive species to live in such a world than to live in a world of fear, in a world of unlimited violence, in a world of deficit. There are also more perfect ideologies, in which people do not need any loans, any interest rates, in which life is better than the life we live at the moment. But they all exist in theory, on paper, like, for example, the theory of communism, which was ideal on paper, but in life turned out to be complete nonsense, which naturally went down the drain. Not the most perfect model of the slave system, this communism, it should be noted. Therefore, having a theory is one thing, but implementing it in life, calculating its work taking into account the peculiarities of human nature, is something completely different. If you can make life better, great, people will write you down in history and erect a monument to you. But while there is nothing better, personally, I would prefer to live in a credit financial, parasitic system than in any other system, from among those that have already been tried and did not give anything good to the majority of people. In general, when we talk about a loan, we are talking about the benefit that you and I have at the present moment. So, you took money from a bank on credit, bought something you need for it, for example, a car or clothes, and now you owe the bank money, while having a car and clothes. Do you understand what this means? You have something here and now, and you pay for it later, in the future, which, as we know, is not predetermined. You use the car and use the clothes, you wear them, well, and something else that you bought for yourself, and gradually pay for it. In other words, you satisfied your need, and only then pay for it, and not vice versa. Well, and when you work for money, hoping to buy something for it later, for example, you want to save up for the same car, then on the contrary, you work here and now, and plan to have the thing you need later, in the future, which is not predetermined. So you save money, save it, and then bam, this money burns up because of some political turmoil, devaluation, inflation, crisis, and all that. And what is left for the person who worked hard for his money? He is left with nothing, that's what. You and I understand that the state is always looking for an opportunity to rob the people, this is its main task. The sovereign takes care of the nobility and works for them, and not for the sake of the people. But it is somehow not very convenient for us to hold the sovereign accountable. The state rarely reports to us for its decisions, and especially for its mistakes. But it can hold us accountable for anything, it does not allow us to take liberties. Therefore, it is not profitable for us to work on credit. But it is profitable to consume on credit, very profitable. This does not mean that we should borrow up to the brim, as some stupid people do, who even buy groceries in the store on credit, thereby overpaying the parasitic bankers with not small interest rates, and completely unnecessary, it should be noted. Nevertheless, this instrument, credit, must be mastered wisely and skillfully handled, with benefit for oneself. And the fact that some people fall into debt bondage, because of loans, is because of their own stupidity. It is not for nothing that they say, make a fool, pray to God, he will break his forehead. It is also dangerous to give matches to children, but this does not mean that matches are not needed. People just need to be taught, made literate, financially literate in our case people, so that they can manage various financial instruments, including credit. By the way, this is what I do, making people more financially advanced, both with the help of my articles and with the help of my consultations. In general, loans meet many of our needs and make many of our desires come true, including unnatural ones. For example, the most popular among the population. Consumer credit allows us to consume more, much more than we can actually afford. It, in fact, fulfills our desires, which have no end, no edge. In addition, most people have a slave mentality, thanks to our education and upbringing, in which they are much more willing to obey someone or something than to act of their own free will. And a loan obliges a person to repay a debt, when you have to go bow to the master banker every month and report to him. This is so familiar to those who were taught to obey, first their elders, then teachers, then bosses, and the state, how can you not get used to it? But when you need to save, when everything depends on your own will, this is really hard for a slave mind. If a person is used to working under duress, when only someone else's force and the fear it causes motivates him to act, then he is basically incapable of organizing himself. He is incapable of self-discipline, incapable of making independent decisions, incapable of being consistent in his actions, of finishing what he started, and so on. I am sure you understand who I am talking about. Such people surround us everywhere, and perhaps you yourself are one of them. Well, what else can I say about this? We are made like this, that is why we become like this, and a consumer loan for us is like an assignment from a teacher that must be completed without asking unnecessary questions. Therefore, if we look at loans from this point of view, they, in principle, fully correspond to the nature of a modern, internally depressed and insecure person, for whom many things that he can afford only thanks to a loan are his way of self-expression. All these cheap show-offs, all these phones, cars, vacations and homeless shelters, all this compensates people for their inner emptiness. This junk instills self-confidence in gray, cowardly little people who want to be someone not due to some personal achievements, but due to their involvement in something great and significant. You see, friends, what a therapeutic effect credit has on people. As for a loan for education, for treatment, for legal services, for psychologist services, and similar services, which we may need in some special situations that sometimes arise in our life, then this, of course, is more, let's say, a smart loan, and undoubtedly very useful and necessary for us. How, one wonders, can a young person, if neither he nor his parents have money, get a normal education, which is naturally paid for? Well, yes, we still have opportunities to get a more or less acceptable education for us for free, but these opportunities are not available to many and every day there are fewer of them. And besides, if we talk about a really high-quality education, with which you will not get lost in this world, then you can get it only for money. In rare cases, you can learn something for free from a smart person who will undertake to teach you. This person will be your personal mentor. But, as you yourself understand, smart people, although there are among us, but they often do not have time for us. Therefore, it is normal to take a loan, invest this money in yourself and then, thanks to your knowledge and skills, take a normal place in society, and not settle down in some trashy place where only drunks and other degenerate scum settle. You also see what opportunities we have thanks to the loan. We are not doomed to hold a hoe in our hands from birth until death. We can find more interesting work for ourselves if we are smart. There is nothing to even talk about medical, legal, psychological services, and a number of other services. If a person really needs these services, then there is nothing to think about and no need to think about. You need to take money wherever you can, from a bank, from friends, from relatives, it doesn't matter where, and help yourself or your loved ones with their help, paying for the services you and your loved ones need with this money. Let's say a person needs to have an expensive operation, without which he will simply die, so what should he do? Waste time on some kind of loan or something else? Of two evils, you need to choose the lesser, if of course, the person is sane. Therefore, it is better to take out a loan and pay for the operation you or someone else needs with it. In the same way, a person may need a good lawyer if, say, he has real problems with the law, and they can happen to anyone, including the whitest and fluffiest people, law-abiding, so to speak, citizens who have not done anything wrong to anyone. This is especially possible in those countries where the law is not respected and therefore not observed. So what now? To go under the knife of justice, or to defend yourself in every possible way, paying for the services of lawyers, attorneys, and other specialists? The answer, I believe, is obvious to everyone. I also recommend that you contact psychologists and psychiatrists if you have serious problems with yourself or your relatives. You do not need to spare money on these specialists. If you feel that your soul is really bad or there is something wrong with your head, contact psychologists and psychiatrists, they will help you. Forget about all sorts of pride and other nonsense, do not get into a bottle, do not do stupid things, do not wait until your internal problems turn into external problems, be smarter. Because I know there are such literate people who say that they are their own psychologists, that only complete idiots go to shrinks, and so on. Look at the suicide statistics, how many drug addicts, alcoholics, and other marginal scum live in our society, and what? Is all this better than having your brains treated by specialists? If people worked more with shrinks, we wouldn't have so many crimes in society, there wouldn't be so many morons who make life difficult for normal people, there wouldn't be many bad things, including suicides. In general, you should definitely take out a loan for such things, I'm absolutely sure of that. By the way, considering the fact that I also provide services of a financial advisor consultant, I would not spare money on these services if I were you. Knowing how many people with different incomes experience problems with money, I understand that many need my services, however, not all of them understand this and not all of them want to spend money to learn how to manage this money correctly. But it's okay, life, as they say, will force a person to reconsider his views on certain things, unless he is so slow-witted that he will allow himself to simply sink to the bottom, with his paws folded. In general, if you think about it, many of us would be in a bad way without loans, and if we can do without all these iPhones and iPods, then it is very difficult for us to do without quality and necessary services, and our possibilities without loans are significantly limited. Well, the fact that a loan is a debt, and that usurious interest makes us slaves to some extent, this is a disadvantage that certainly needs to be fought competently and consistently, eradicating it with careful methods, but which does not need to be burned out with a hot iron at the root. In place of usurers, believe me, if not me, then at least history, will come dishonest and decent people, with such a sharp change in climate, barbarians and savages will come in their place, people with weapons will come in place of bankers and take everything from you, including your freedom. People cannot live in such a way as not to parasitize on each other, to destroy each other, suppress each other and harm each other. Such is our nature. We, as I have written many times, are quite aggressive creatures, and if not in one form, then in another, but our aggression will certainly be expressed. Agree, credit is not the worst form of aggression, not the most terrible form of slavery, although loans make people debtors, but they do not shackle them in metal chains and do not force them to toil for food all day long. But what prevents us from returning to a primitive slave system? Only a multipolar world and confrontation of systems, right? But when the process of globalization ends, when all the borders between countries are erased, which is what the brainless blockheads who advocate such changes dream of, when a monopoly on power is established, then most of us will be finished. Most of us will simply be disposed of as the most unprofitable eaters, others will be made absolute slaves, and many positions will be replaced by machines that do not ask for a salary, do not need motivation, neither in the form of a carrot, nor in the form of a stick. With cheap energy, and such will appear sooner or later, the costs of high-performance machines will be many times less than the costs of the most undemanding Chinese working for a bowl of rice. And why the hell would it be necessary to keep this entire army of eternally dissatisfied and insatiable people? And what need will there be for credit then? Think about it. Friends, be glad that you can consume and develop for your own benefit and pleasure, thanks to loans. Here, remember me later, especially those of you who are very young now. In the future, people will no longer have all this. People will have played enough with democracy, human rights, all this liberalism and pseudo-freedom, and not the best times will come, in which only the very best of the chosen will have a good life. And it's not even that the resources on the planet are running out, they can still solve the problem, technically, it's about progress itself. If you can replace an accountant who needs to be paid a salary, given a vacation, greeted with an accounting program that is many times more effective, which will not make mistakes and which will not deceive, then you will do it. And this can be done with many of us. We are not so useful that we can and should be taken into account by those to whom we bow to the ground. Why the hell should we give people loans and let them transfer their goods to shit, if somewhere people can be intimidated, somewhere disposed of, and somewhere simply replaced with high-performance machines? They say that in captivity people have problems with creativity, but are people free now? Are they completely free now? No, now people have only the illusion of freedom and even the illusion of significance. Well, this illusion of freedom does not prevent them from creating correctly, does it? It does not prevent them from doing science, does not prevent them from making discoveries. So in the future, people's lives can be organized in such a way that there will be no need for such a barbaric destruction of resources that we are witnessing today. Because there will simply be no need for those people, because of whom and for whom all this is done. I will tell you this, friends, loans are the basis of not just this credit and financial system in which we live today, they are the basis of our entire world order, at least the part of it that we consider civilized. Without loans, there will be no civilization in the form in which it exists today and is more or less developing. It is very difficult to keep in check the masses of greedy, selfish, insatiable, aggressive, preoccupied, parasitic creatures, to whom we are mostly friends. Whether we want to admit it or not, but we are like that, we are not very good creatures, not very correct. It is possible to control people and motivate them to work at gunpoint, but not for long, we all know this, I hope that everyone knows this from history. It is also not very convenient to keep people in chains, as well as in cages behind barbed wire, because in this case people quickly degrade and start eating each other like spiders in a jar. But money, especially issued on credit, has very effectively subjugated most people. People obey money, listen to it, are ready to do anything for it, even to part with life for it. Is this not happiness? And this happiness is not only for those who control people with this money, but for all of us, including those who are controlled with the help of money. At least we have some order in society, at least some stability, and quite good prospects, if in addition to satisfying our animal instincts, we also think about achieving higher goals. Destroy this entire credit system and our entire civilization will collapse with it, because if even fluctuations in the dollar exchange rate turn people into savages, if even during an economic crisis people start gobbling each other up and sometimes even unrest occurs in a single country, then what can we say about the complete destruction of this, albeit parasitic, but quite effective financial and economic system? Are we going to build socialism in place of rotten capitalism, or something else, something new, perhaps? It doesn't seem to me that we will build something new and more perfect, because given our current level of development, we are more inclined to destroy the old than to create something new. This post-industrial world relaxes people too much for them to even want to make some new, qualitative leap forward. However, it is quite possible that I am wrong. The only problem with loans, in my opinion, is the greed of those who issue the loan and those who take it. Some push their loans on everyone, and very persistently, so much so that it just irritates you. Others take out such loans in such quantities that they don't know how to pay them back. Because of this, such careless and generally unthinking people create problems for themselves out of nowhere. So the root of these problems with loans and with money in general is mainly greed, as well as laziness and stupidity, or to put it mildly, the financial illiteracy of the population. Nevertheless, we have become so accustomed to it, such are the unspoken rules in our society, that we should blame someone else, or something else, for our problems and mistakes, not ourselves. In our case, it is the loan that acts as a scapegoat, which means it tempts people and that is why they take it, which means it chains them, people, in debt, ruins them, and so on. In general, the loan, and of course, the damned usurious bankers behind it are to blame for everything, and the people who have suffered from the loan in one way or another are simply innocent victims of someone else's manipulations. In principle, if you think about it, then partly, this is actually true. After all, idiots who do not think about what they are doing are specially bred here, fools are pampered and cherished here, because they are being prepared for slaughter. Even education has been crippled lately, so that there are even more stupid people. The economy needs stupid people, it needs fools. Any state actually needs fools, that is, cannon fodder and slaves. But what's the point of referring to this if we ourselves are the ones who suffer from our stupidity? Well, yes, they manipulate us, yes, they make morons out of us in every possible way, yes, quality education is not available to many, so what? We can't ban everything that a fool can get his own bumps on, you must agree, we need to somehow enlighten fools, we need to somehow influence society, and not adapt to its most stupid representatives.